The sheriff didn't knock. He slammed a property seizure notice onto my window so hard the glass trembled. Behind him, Grace from the HOA smiled like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. 9,000 in violations, Mr.
9,000 in
Reed.
violations.
Effective immediately.
We're
All
with a
for
court
one
order,
swim in
Mr.
my own
Reed.
lake. Before I could respond, a county patrol boat rolled down my driveway headed toward my dock like they were about to claim the water itself. Neighbors gathered, phones came out. Grace whispered, "You should have complied." That's when I spotted him, a stranger in a black coat, filming everything. Not me, not Grace. He was recording the lake like he was waiting for something to surface. Grace didn't wait for the sheriff to finish taping the notice. She stepped past him onto my porch and snapped a photo of my wet swim towel like it was evidence from a crime scene. "Unauthorized water activity. Second offense," she said, tapping her tablet. "Penalties increase daily." That was her first action, not a greeting, not a question, a strike. I told her the lake had been in my family since 1923, that I'd inherited the cottage just 18 months earlier, but she didn't care. Her eyes flicked to the shoreline, calculating hungry, and her hand trembled around her clipboard, the pawn shop tag still dangling from her purse like a secret she hoped no one noticed. "Property ownership doesn't exempt you from watershed compliance," she said. "People like you always think it does. People like me, a teacher who came home every day exhausted, relying on that lake as the only thing that kept me sane." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "And don't think what happened with your dog gives you special treatment." The words hit like a punch. Buddy, the one topic she should have never touched. Grace turned to leave, satisfied she'd unsettled me. But halfway down the walk, her phone buzzed and her mask slipped when she whispered, "He won't be a problem. Not after Friday." The first warning appeared before dawn, slapped onto my window hard enough that the tape popped. A bright yellow sheet screamed, "Contamination event logged, immediate review required." No explanation, no signature, just the accusation. By 8:00 a.m. A second packet waited on my porch, close-up photos of my dock, each circled in red like crime scene evidence. The timestamp 5:14 a.m. told me Grace had been lurking in darkness before even the birds were awake. Because I worked from home Thursdays, I watched her return in real time. She didn't walk up, didn't greet me. She paced the fence line, slowly sweeping that fake environmental device over my water as if she was detecting radiation. Her face never lifted. Her eyes tracked the lake, not the readings. Then violation number 3 hit my inbox. Unauthorized Water Disturbance Assessment Protocol Task 47. HOA violations don't use tasks, and certainly not numbered protocols. That phrasing had come from someone outside the neighborhood. A jogger waved at her while passing by. She didn't respond. She simply turned her back, lifted her phone, and took a picture of my shoreline, then my house, before walking away with mechanical precision. It wasn't harassment anymore. It was surveillance. The next morning, the sound of crunching gravel snapped me awake. I checked the window and froze. Grace wasn't at the fence this time. She was inside my yard, crouched beside my kayaks, with her phone angled toward the underside of the hulls. No knock, no request, just trespassing, like she owned the place. She spoke softly into her phone, believing no one could hear. "He follows a routine. He goes outside around 7. You'll have the opening you need Friday." Pause. "Yes. I've mapped everything. Every entry point, mapped. My house, my lake, my yard." I stepped outside before my brain caught up with my feet. "What are you doing on my property?" Her reply didn't miss a beat. "Documenting slope non-compliance. Your shoreline grade is unstable." "It's dirt," I said. "Dirt and grass." "Exactly," she replied, writing something down like I'd confirmed an infraction. When I checked my cameras later, her trespass lasted exactly 17 seconds, long enough to collect data, short enough to look incidental. But one detail didn't fit. She didn't walk home afterward. She walked straight to a black sedan idling at the curb and handed the driver a sealed folder. He didn't look at her. He looked at my house. By day 5, the harassment evolved from irritating to financially catastrophic. A $400 fine for excessive splash displacement, a $550 penalty for dock surface irregularities, a $720 charge for suspected ecological disturbance. By the end of the week, I owed $3 120 inches fabricated violations. But the truly dangerous moment came when I walked onto my grandmother's dock and felt it sway beneath me. The bolts were loose, not worn, but deliberately loosened. Tool marks along the metal edges didn't match anything I owned. Someone had sabotaged it, and the attacks weren't isolated. Tom, the mechanic from next door, knocked on my door with a violation in hand. I parked my truck in my driveway like I've done for 20 years, he said. She fined me $1, 100 for commercial obstruction. Maria, who'd hung a single wreath for the holidays, got an $800 penalty for seasonal clutter. Frank's vegetable garden, $950 for unauthorized agricultural expansion. I compressed the rest into one undeniable conclusion. Grace was shaking down every resident who looked solvent. Then came the break in her armor. Emily, the HOA treasurer, asked to meet me in secret. We sat in the back of a coffee shop, her hands trembling as she slid a folder across the table. She created a shell company, Emily whispered. Environmental Solutions, LLC. Fake invoices, fake maintenance reports. She's been funneling money into her own account. $38,000 so far. Grace wasn't just abusing power. She was orchestrating a full-scale financial extraction. The police lights flashed outside my home 2 days later, not for Grace, but for me. A formal complaint accused me of aggressive confrontation toward a community authority. The officer reading it looked embarrassed, but the protocol required a report. Grace stood across the street with her arms folded, watching like she was finally enjoying a win. Then another car pulled up. Detective Luis Wilson. His brow knotted the moment he scanned the document. This isn't about you, he said under his breath. She's building a narrative. Paper trail makes you look volatile. If anything happens, they'll say they saw the signs. He handed me a file of his own. Buddy's case. Chemical reports. Runoff analysis. Evidence dismissed years ago. It all matched Grace's environmental treatments. But Luis wasn't done. The real issue isn't her, he said quietly. Someone wired her gambling debt. Someone extended her foreclosure. Someone's paying for her to keep the pressure on. Grace wasn't manipulating the system alone. She had backing and a mission she wasn't smart enough to design. The break-in came on a Thursday at 2:47 a.m. The first noise was faint, a slow testing pressure on the back door handle. Then soft footsteps slid along the siding. Window latches clicked. Someone moved around my house with a methodical calm that didn't match petty criminals. I whispered into my phone while gripping the bat beside my bed. There's someone trying to get in. Police arrived in 14 minutes, but the intruder vanished. No footprints leading away from the house. Only a trail that ended at the lake's edge. It didn't make sense until the next day, when Tom arrived pale and shaking with footage from his security camera. At 3:15 a.m., a figure in full scuba gear emerged from the water, climbed onto my bank, and prowled around my house. They didn't rummage or rush. They examined, measured, tested every entry point with professional precision. Then after 20 minutes, they slipped back into the lake and disappeared beneath the surface. A break-in executed from underwater, not a burglar, a trained operative. Later that afternoon, while pretending to read her meter, Grace walked by my fence and whispered into her phone, "He's rattled. Good. Tell them Friday is perfect." Friday? She wasn't the mastermind. She was a messenger, and whoever she was reporting to wasn't done. The celebration didn't feel like a party at first, more like a community holding its breath after a storm finally passed. Smoke lifted from the grills in slow ribbons, drifting over the lake, while clusters of neighbors gathered at picnic tables set in a long line facing the shoreline. The new playground bought with money Grace once tried to steal stood bright and clean behind us kids, climbing the slides like they were testing whether this piece was real. Tom called the meeting back to order, with a voice still rough from shouting earlier. He didn't bother with formalities. Nobody had the patience for ceremony. "We're here because we made it through something ugly," he said, gesturing toward the lake. "And we need to decide what this community looks like without fear." People quieted, leaning in, some folding their arms like they were bracing for impact, others relaxing for the first time in months. Luis stepped forward, jacket undone, badge visible. He didn't introduce himself. Everyone already knew him as the one person who kept showing up when things went sideways. "Judge Washington's ruling is official," he said, holding up the stamped document. "Grace Perez is removed from all HOA positions. She will serve 4 years and 8 months in state prison. She owes $45,000 in restitution. She is permanently barred from community governance." The words landed like anchors, each one pulling a little more tension out of the room. But he continued motioning subtly toward a man standing beside him, broad-shouldered, clean-cut, wearing the kind of neutral expression federal agents use when they know people will stare. "This is Agent Webb," Luis said. "He's here because Grace wasn't acting alone. There were outside pressures behind her decisions, serious ones. Today, I want you all to hear directly what's being done to make sure this doesn't happen again." Webb didn't step onto a podium or clear his throat theatrically. He just spoke. "The group funding Grace's actions is facing federal charges," he said. Their influence ends here. Your lake is now under a protective designation. No extraction permits will be approved. No forced acquisitions will be allowed. This property belongs to you, and it will stay that way. Simple sentences, each carrying enough weight that the crowd barely breathed until he finished. The reaction wasn't a cheer. It was quieter than that. Shoulders dropping, hands unclenching, a couple of people wiping at their faces like they'd been holding on to fear so tightly it had carved marks into them. Maria's granddaughter tugged her sleeve, asking if the swings were safe now. Maria nodded, and the little girl ran off shrieking with joy. It was the first sound all evening that felt completely untouched by what we'd lived through. Then, attention shifted to the folding table where the new board members sat. They weren't seasoned leaders, just neighbors who wanted the neighborhood back. They reviewed the lake access agreement line by line, asking clear questions, double-checking every clause. When they finally signed beside my name, people actually stepped forward to shake hands rather than argue. It felt like stitching torn fabric, slow and steady, but real. Emily approached next, holding a cup of lemonade and wearing an expression that hovered between relief and disbelief. "I thought I'd be fired today," she said softly. "Instead, I signed a budget with actual transparency." Her laugh was small but honest. She didn't need to say anything else. The look in her eyes said she finally felt safe in her own role. Conversations blended around us, neighbors comparing notes about fines they'd finally avoided, planning cleanup projects, discussing repairs that had been delayed during the chaos. Nobody spoke about Grace by name anymore. She had become a past tense the moment the patrol car rolled away earlier that afternoon. As dusk settled, lanterns flickered on along the path leading to the dock. The lake turned silver under the first traces of moonlight, its surface smooth, not because nothing had happened here, but because everything had. I walked to the edge, not to escape or think or brace, but simply to stand in a place that had been a battleground and was finally returning to being water and sky. Kids sprinted toward the playground, their laughter rolling across the grass. Tom stacked chairs with a few volunteers. Someone turned up a speaker playing old rock songs. Plates clattered, ice sloshed in coolers. And slowly the gathering shifted from a meeting into something looser, a shared exhale, a quiet reclaiming. Luis joined me at the dock, hands in his pockets. "You did good today," he said. "We did," I replied. He nodded once, watching the reflections on the lake. "This place is solid now. Whatever comes next, you've got people who won't let it happen in the shadows again." He walked back toward the tables, leaving me with the water still steady, unbothered. The same lake Grace tried to weaponize, the same shoreline strangers once mapped like a target. But now it held a different weight. Not fear, not threat, ownership. I touched the railing of the dock, the wood warm from the afternoon sun. Justice isn't loud, I realized. It's quiet. It's a lake returned to stillness after months of storms. And somewhere beneath that calm surface, whatever secret once drew danger toward my doorstep remained untouched, silent, buried, waiting for a story that wasn't tonight's. Tonight belonged to peace. And the moment I finally felt it again, I knew I had won.